Welcome back, everyone. And it's recording. Good. We're on. It's me, Father Dan, here to answer a whole bunch of questions. So I've gone through about a dozen or so questions from our religious education program, focusing on some of the questions our younger folks had, but some really deep questions there as well. And then did a second video on COVID, which should be up soon if it's not up already. And so now I'm going to tackle the list of just sort of general questions that have come in. I was going to organize these a little bit, but it turned out that a lot of them focused on liturgy and church and worship, so they're already basically organized. So sitting here and let's answer some questions. So how do you bless the holy water that we use in the church, and what should we use it for at home? Sort of a twofer here. So how do you bless the holy water that we use in church? So first of all, I have this book, the Book of Blessings, or Bob for short. And Bob can bless just about anything. There is, I don't even know if you can see this on a webcam, right? Okay. I mean, blessing for a departing parishioner happens to be here. There's an order for the welcoming of new parishioners. Order for the blessing of food and drink for food for Thanksgiving Day. Blessing of mothers for Mother's Day. Blessing of bells. Blessing of an organ. Blessing of a Christmas tree. All kinds of different blessings in here. So there's certainly a blessing in here for holy water. And there's a big, this is a huge deal liturgically at the Easter Vigil. Because the Easter Vigil, we're celebrating all these gorgeous sacraments, and there's candles, and there's smoke, and there's water, and using all of these symbols to celebrate life and purity and redemption and all kinds of good things. So, but the other time when I'm blessing water quite often is for baptism. And so this is, I found this online. This is pretty much, I think they've done a new translation kind of recently, but it's still very similar. This is the blessing over the baptismal water that I would do at a baptism. So, little pro tip, if you ever find yourself baptizing small children, that was given to me by an experienced priest, more than one experienced priest, you want to have warm water that you're suddenly pouring on a child's head. So priests are, it's a few of these tricks. You don't want the baby to be shocked. You don't want them to cry. About the worst experience I had, I felt so bad for the mother. She held her baby out over the font, and I started pouring water just on the forehead, right? It's running down, and the poor kid startled and spooked. They had their eyes shut. They didn't see it coming, you know? And they spooked. And they threw their head back, and the water that I was pouring on their forehead was now like in their eyes and up their nose. Not a great thing to wake up to when you're a little baby, and they were very upset, and let that be known. So you want to use warm water. And unless you're going to bop it in a microwave, you're usually getting warm water from the tap. And so you really want to bless it as part of the liturgy. So it doesn't come from a special place necessarily. It's just ordinary tap water. And it becomes holy. It becomes sacred because of this blessing. So sometimes a priest can bless it as simply as he'd bless anything else. Bless this water in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. But on more formal occasions, when you want to do a lengthier blessing, the blessing over the baptismal water is the way to go. Father, you give us grace through sacramental signs, which tell us of the wonders of your unseen power. And what this blessing does, and this is a trick sometimes if you want to do a longer or beautiful prayer, is it goes through the biblical history of water and the many ways that water has been used in the Old Testament. So, at the very dawn of creation, your spirit breathed on the water. So this is before dry land emerged, right? Water was there in the very beginning. And then all that God made emerges from the chaos of the water. There's the great flood, right? There's the waters of the Red Sea, which parted. The waters of the Jordan, very important. This is where baptism begins, as it's practiced today. Baptized by John, anointed with the Spirit, and even water and blood flow from Jesus' side on the cross, right? Blood certainly will be, we talk about Eucharist, but water is connected to baptism, and then we actually invoke Father, look now with love upon your church, it says, and unseal for her the foundation of baptism, or the fount of baptism, I think it says in that translation I'm more familiar with. The power of the Holy Spirit give the water the grace of your Son. So, and it goes on from there. So hopefully that answers your question, the first part of your question anyway. The second part, what should we use it for at home? Well, it's, in a sense, it's a way of bottling a blessing, right? If you're going to go for a hike, you bottle some water and take it with you. If you want to bless something, you bottle a blessing and take it with you. So it's anything that you touch, you're asking God's blessing to rest upon it. So some people will bless their homes, their windows, their doors. Certainly you can always bless yourself. It's a reminder of your own baptism, the time that you were washed with water, and hopefully it didn't wind up going up your nose. But just as you would bless yourself when you go into a church. I don't have one in this room, but I have a little holy water font with St. Francis on it down in my office. But what always happens is it's so small that everything just evaporates right out of it really quickly, especially in the wintertime when it's super dry. So gotta just keep refilling these things, right? So how do you bless holy water? That is it. Some priests in some situations will also add a little bit of salt. The image of water is that it's pure. It's supposed to cleanse and bring life. You need water for crops. You need water so you don't die in the desert. Salt helps to preserve a little bit, preserve water. Blessed salt is used in exorcisms and things like that. I don't work much with salt myself. But sometimes priests will also add a little bit of salt to the water. And the idea there is that even though the water evaporates really quickly, like it evaporates out of my baptismal font, right, or my font in my office, the salt would linger and keep away unpleasant things like slugs. So next question: why do we read the same readings in Gospel from year to year? The missalette is set up for the same for year A, B, and C. Some churches have a hard-covered book that is used from year to year with A, B, and C. So the sacramentary is... oh my gosh. Why am I totally blanking on the name of our wonderful cycle of readings? It'll come to me. Anyway, but the idea of breaking the Bible apart into this A, B, and C cycle, which we go through on the weekends, or the 1-2 cycle that we go through for daily Mass, the idea here is to be able to read not necessarily the entire Bible, but an awful lot of it, and to become familiar with the story of Jesus Christ. And so A, B, and C, even if they're all different, and they focus on a different one of the synoptic gospels. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke are very similar. They're written from a similar point of view. They tell similar stories. John is a little bit different. And so John gets used throughout A, B, and C. It doesn't have a whole year to itself. John gets used on special occasions like Easter, Christmas, things like that. But the idea is that you're tying the story of Christ's life to the rhythm of the year. So Jesus is within 1 year. We're certainly celebrating Christmas and Easter, and so Jesus' birth and his resurrection, but then you kind of tie in other things along that year. So you'd say, like, okay, well, like 9 months before Christmas, that would be when the angel would have appeared to Mary and she would have conceived. So many days after Christmas, they would have gone to the temple, so we're going to have a day for that. But then, once you've sort of wrapped up with Christmas, you start, this year we're beginning at the beginning of the Gospels of Mark we're going through right now, and you just go a little bit further into Mark every single Sunday. So that's what happens with the Gospel. And then the other two readings, the first of them taken from the Old Testament and the second one taken from the New, they're often supposed to tie into the Gospel in some way. So if Jesus is quoting the Bible, then often they'll chase down the exact quote from the Bible and we'll see it in context. What was how Jewish people are already just like automatically just familiar with that because they grew up with it. So Jesus would have just needed to toss out a little fragment and they'd have the whole thing. Maybe we need the little help sometimes to remember what the context is. But there's a rhythm to this, the lectionary, that's the word I was looking for. the lectionary cycle, so liturgical cycle. So this was a way for Catholics to become familiar with the Bible. Because among other Christian groups, we had a reputation for not really being into Bible study, at least in our everyday church service. And this became so popular, this way of reading through the Bible in a year, and then the next year you read through the Bible in a different way, and then the third year you read through it through the lens of another gospel, and then you start all over again. This is so wildly popular that a whole bunch of other Protestant churches started to do the same. So Pastor Aaron Neff, a good friend of mine, who was at Corfu Presbyterian until recently here in town, he said that they would use this cycle in their churches, if I'm not mistaken. They modify it a little bit. Sometimes their readings are a little bit longer than ours, but it's been a great blessing for everybody. Just a neat way to read through the Bible, read through the story, I think, the story of Jesus in a year. So from Carol Freeman, we watch your Mass every Sunday, Father, and really enjoy it. Today, however, the Gospel, it mentions Boangers. In all of my 72 years, I have never heard of this before. How come? Well, so I had to look this up myself. Sons of Thunder. Why on earth is this in here? So it's not new in the Bible. It's always been there. But every once in a while, we'll see something with fresh eyes, or it catches our attention. I often see that as a sign that God's trying to tell me something. And I'm happy to talk about it, but it's not particularly new. Jesus loves to give names to people, and his Father loves to give names to people. So Abram becomes Abraham, Sarai becomes Sarah, and Jacob becomes Israel. These are big moments in the Old Testament where God comes so close to someone, and they are so much a part of his plans. And his relationship to them is so significant that it overshadows their very identity. To name someone is to make them family and to show that you have power over them. So you name your child. Sometimes later on, as people grow up, as they try to, and maybe they have unpleasant family memories, they may rename themselves to show that they have power over themselves. When you marry, you may rename yourself or be remarried as you're entering into a new family. So it marks a significant change in your relationships, but also in your very identity and who you are, how you introduce yourself to people. And sometimes it's just a nickname. So when I was in college, for whatever reason at the time, the custom was if you were being obviously very formal to somebody, then you might say, Mr. Serbicki, if you were, somewhat formal, but, it's a peer, you would use somebody's name, their Christian name, their first name. But if you were like best buds with somebody, you would switch back to using their last name for some reason. So I was like always Serbicki for the people that could pronounce it. And for people that couldn't pronounce it, they would just devastate it in the ways they found most amusing at the time. So, there's a sign here, not just of power, but of familiarity. It's not just about a formal relationship. It's saying you're really close to someone. And sometimes when you get a nickname, there's a cool story attached to it. So Sons of Thunder, when I looked this up, it says they're not really sure why he would have named them the Sons of Thunder. The one story about this that makes us wonder if at least they had a fiery temperament, there's a town that is not exactly welcoming Jesus because his destination is Jerusalem, and they've got a bit of a different way of practicing their religion. They don't like people that are going to Jerusalem. And so they said, "Lord, shall we call down fire from heaven to consume them?" Now, there is no evidence whatsoever that that is a thing that they could actually do. There are instances, and we'll get to this a little later on in one of the questions. There are some instances where we see that sort of thing happening in the Bible, but Jesus does not call down fire from heaven on anybody. So he rebukes them, said, "This is not what we're about," and they go on. But possibly angry, fiery people. And this is important for me to mention at least, because sometimes somebody will come to me in confession and they'll say they struggle with anger, and anger can can make us do some really regrettable things, and it can lead us to hurt people. But Jesus recruited angry people. He recruited fiery people. He recruited people that made mistakes. It doesn't stop you from doing good. And in fact, I think sometimes that emotional passion and energy is what made them so effective in ministry. They were tireless workers. They were really bothered by the injustices that they saw in the world, and they wanted to make a difference. They weren't just going to sleep the whole day away. So yeah, they sometimes did the wrong thing, but they did something, and they learned. And by practice, they became better. So, Voyagers. This is a bit more of a St. Maxi question here. So, is there any way the weekly bulletin could be put online somehow for us to view? I think many parishioners would like to be able to see the bulletin, especially if they're unable to attend Mass. Great point. I just had a conversation with Sue in the office about this, and I'm looking into ways to make this more available to people. I'm gonna try again to switch us over to a different software that will make it a bit easier for us to produce the bulletin, and then also hopefully to get the entire thing online. But in the meantime, we do put some elements of the bulletin available on our website, and that's something that you can check out. I'm glad that you're here on YouTube and you're enjoying our content. You've probably seen me do a Mass or two then, and so you'll certainly get some announcements there. But it's good to be able to read the bulletin as well. So we'll try to be able to pass the whole thing along to you, either as a website or a PDF, maybe, if you're into that sort of thing. If at communion I drop a host on the floor and I pick it up because it is holy, what should I do with it? Should I have left it there, or should I have given it to you? Okay, great question. So as Catholics, we believe that this is more than just bread. This is a holy presence. This is a holy thing. This is Jesus Christ's real presence under the appearances of bread and wine. So he trusts himself to us in a very vulnerable way. He doesn't have hands and feet to protect himself. And so we try to honor that trust by treating him as respectfully as we can. But, sometimes things don't go well, right? Sometimes people didn't treat Jesus well, and sometimes accidents happen. So it's not something to panic about or to be upset about or angry about or whatever. You just do the best you can. So usually people dive for the host to try to resolve the situation as quickly as they can. Sometimes I've seen people, knock coconuts. Priest and the poor person that's going to receive dive for the host at the same time and collide. So that can certainly happen. But I think to pick it up as quickly and respectfully as you can. And then what do you do with it? Now you've got it in your hand. Well, whoever winds up with it, the priest or the layperson, ought to try to consume it as quickly as they can. That would be plan A. Now, in my particular case, I can't eat most hosts because I can't have gluten. So I need to have a special host that's low gluten. So ideally for me, the person who dropped the host would wind up consuming it. But quite often they're not comfortable doing that. And if it's kind of dirty on the floor and you're not a big person for the 5-second rule or the 3-second rule, then maybe you don't. So what do we do next? Well, as I said, Eucharist is the presence of Jesus under the appearance of bread and wine. So if you get rid of the appearance, then you get rid of Eucharist, and it's no longer Jesus present. So the backup plan is to simply return the Eucharist to the elements. So you're going to dissolve it in water, burn it with fire, or bury it in the earth. We've already determined, I guess, that dropping it through the air doesn't really change anything. So that is basically what you should do. Pick it up safely without colliding with anybody, assuming that the minister hasn't picked it up themselves. Consume it if you can. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, return it to the person that gave it to you in the first place. They'll give you a fresh host, and ultimately they will dissolve it in water. And sometimes things get complicated. Sometimes somebody throws up a host or spits out a host, or you wind up with wine getting spilled, the precious blood on the carpet. And in all of those situations, you're just going to try to dissolve it in water until it no longer has the appearance of bread or wine. So, there you go. How are we doing on time? About 20 minutes? All right. We'll go through a few more of these. So, A relative of mine is uncertain regarding the church's rules on receiving communion after marrying someone who was divorced. They were married by a justice of the peace because he did not get his previous marriage annulled. He passed away 3 years ago. Her question is, can I now receive communion? So, this sounds like a question I would get in a seminary exam. These sorts of questions can get kind of complicated, and it really depends on particular details. So, always good to talk to a canon lawyer, somebody that specializes in these things. It's certainly something that you can research. I'm hoping I understand this question correctly as well. I'll elaborate a little bit to kind of explain what my understanding of it is. So, you've got this guy who has a previous marriage. Wait. I actually think this is pretty straightforward. I'm sorry. I went through multiple interpretations of this, but I think what I'm settling on is that the person that wants to receive communion is not married at all in any sense. The person that they were with died. It's quite possible that the person that they were with, it was an irregular situation. There wasn't an annulment or anything like that. And I would say there's nothing stopping you from receiving communion right now. If you want to go to confession, that would be a good thing to do, I think. Talk to the priest and start receiving. The only thing that might block you from receiving communion is if you are currently in a relationship where you're not married in the eyes of the church for some reason. You're Catholic, but you did not get married in front of a priest. If you do want to get married in front of a priest, that's when you're going to start jumping through all of these hoops to get everything worked out. But if I have that wrong, let me know. I'd be happy to take another stab at it, or even give the diocese a call and work out some of the details. But it sounds like this is a situation that was in the past, but it kind of resolved itself because the spouse died. So you're able to receive communion. Number G. So during this time of COVID-19, would you or the diocese approve and perform group confessions or a penitential service for our faithful? This could be done before a regular scheduled Mass or even on a separate day. I feel there's so many changes going on in our world and church. This service would be greatly appreciated. Easter season's a wonderful time to plan a special service like this, and I would go so far as to say I'd like this done once a month. Thank you for all you do for our parish. I wasn't quite sure what was meant here by group confessions. There's a couple of different kinds of ways you can receive the sacrament of confession. But before we even go into the sacrament of confession, there are multiple ways that you can receive forgiveness of sins. Certainly, baptism forgives all sins. Mortal, venial, doesn't matter, knocks them all out. Bad news is you can only be baptized once, okay? So for everybody that's already been baptized, we're just going to keep moving along here. Eucharist. Eucharist can forgive venial sin. So if you're in mortal sin, you shouldn't receive communion. But if you're only in venial sin, you can not only receive communion, but it's considered to have this healing factor to it, this remedial factor. It helps us to fight against sin. But ideally, if you've got something on your conscience, you would be able to go to confession. I can't do this virtually. It's not allowed. I have to do it in person. And so that was difficult, especially when we were first starting with COVID. Typically, confession is done one-on-one in hushed whispers at a close range. That makes it a little difficult with COVID as well. The compromise that I have done here at St. Max is for those that would like to go to confession with me. I have been doing it at a table in the rectory in a well-lit space with windows so everybody can see what's going on, make sure nothing inappropriate is happening in the house. And then I've got a fan overhead to keep the air moving, and we stay 6 feet apart with masks on. That's about the best way I can think of to handle this for people that want to go to confession one-on-one. I do this quite often on Wednesday night after our 7 o'clock Mass. So if you want to come by about 7:30 or so, I'm sitting in the rectory and I just wait till people stop coming, basically. So if you want to show up at 7:30 and wait in line, if there is one, you can certainly do that. I also hear confessions over in East Pembroke at our First Friday Mass, which is at 10 o'clock after the First Friday Mass. So those are some options for being one-on-one. If you like to use a screen, I don't really have a setup for that, and we'd have to be too close anyway with the screen, so I can't use our traditional confessionals at this time, so I apologize. But group confessions, that's really what you're asking about. There is an allowance in an emergency situation for a priest to absolve large numbers of people at the same time. But that is generally considered to be a situation in which time is of the essence. Imagine a sinking ship. That's the classic example. The Titanic is going down, everybody's clinging to the deck, and the priest says, "Oh my goodness, here's the blessing, we're all going to heaven, let's go." An awful situation where you're just making the best of it. Or when troops perhaps are going to battle and you're about to go up and over the trenches and somebody says, "Father, can I go to confession? Father, can I go to confession?" And we don't have time, they're blowing the whistle, let's go. So you can quickly absolve everybody in those situations. So people were asking, is this situation something that is so desperate and so urgent that you could quickly absolve everyone of all of their sins? And the church said no. There's not that time constraint. If someone is in danger of death, if somebody feels that they're struggling under a burden of very serious sin, they should seek out a priest and try to find some way that they could safely meet one-on-one. Okay, mask up, put up a barrier 6 feet apart, open air, use a fan, whatever you got to do to keep things just as dissipated as possible and as safe as possible. That would be the best way to handle serious sin, especially if there's a danger of death. The anointing of the sick, absolution in danger of death, also forgives sins, even if the person is unconscious. So that's still an option as well. But we do sometimes do something in a group without any kind of sinking ships, a penance service, if you will. And I'm wondering if that was sort of in your mind, and that's a large group of people come together in the church, and we get a bunch of priests together as well, and we all sing, and we do a reading, and then everybody gets in line, and you go through confession as kind of quickly as you can. And we would do that typically in right before Christmas and right before Easter, so in Advent and Lent. And I don't know if that's what you were getting at about group confessions or a penitential service. That would really be more the penitential service. And again, we're discouraging large groups of people getting together, certainly singing, so we wouldn't want to be doing any kind of optional extra kind of stuff. There wouldn't be a lot of value into getting a lot of people in one place, in one room like that, unless it's something that's really important like Mass, where we just couldn't do it any other way. So for confession, it's still better to do it one-on-one and not to go unless you really need to. That's basically what we're limited to right now. So sorry that was a little long. I hope that was helpful, and I am going to take a break here. So we break these up, and when we come back next time, I'll say a friend of mine said that when he gets a holy card with a relic in it, he throws it out. So I have to think about that one. I'll see you next time. Keep submitting your questions, and I'll keep answering them. Take care, everyone. God bless.